said that you were 14 when Ghostwatch aired, and you remember the day like it was yesterday. Give me the first 30 seconds. What did it feel like watching something like that live for the first time?
Yeah, so it was that thing where we knew it was coming. So it was in the TV listings. We knew this thing was going to be on. It was on Halloween night. And so at that sort of age, that kind of early teenager, you're like, I'm really excited. I don't quite know what to expect, but this event telly is coming. So all the kids in school were all talking about it, and then it happened. So fantastic.
Yeah, I know it was a really big thing over in the UK. It's like we didn't know what it was like at all over here in the States until much, much later. So that kind of built up for a really cool horror thing. It's kind of envious. So I'm jealous. And everybody, welcome to yet another episode of Retro Horror School Talks. I am Brandy, otherwise known as the Terrorific Lady. And April is Retro TV Month. And this episode is called Hall Pass, meaning that I have the guest. I'm pointing in the right direction, I think. I have the guest pick the topic and kind of lead the deep dive. Today's guest is Leighton Collins of the Surviving Horror Podcast. And they came in with a perfect choice, which you heard us talk about a little bit about 30 seconds ago, BBC Ghostwatch. So, hi, Leighton. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Really excited.
Yes, very excited to have you here. We had to reschedule from last weekend because as we were talking about, I was bleh, but I'm feeling a little bit better. So yeah, I was not. We're going to do this today. Give us a quick intro for anybody listening or watching. So, who are you? What is the Surviving Horror Podcast, and what kind of horror fan are you?
I'm a big horror nerd. Grew up in the 80s, watching horror way too young. In fact, I found my kind of, in the UK, we have a kind of baby book where your parent fills stuff in for the first few years. And my mum made notes when I was only like 4 or 5 saying he started to look at these kind of Hammer horror picture books and things. So way too young, as almost just a toddler. Surviving Horror, me and my friend Danny, we host that. And we just look at horror movies that we love, often older ones, but some new ones too. We kind of think about the mistakes that people make in horror movies, what they could do differently. Could we do anything better, or would we just get eaten by zombies or killed by vampires? And as a horror fan, I like cheering on the goodies. I like it when they survive and make it to the end. I really like zombie movies where they kind of defeat the masses of zombies and escape to maybe another day as well. Favorite movie is The Thing.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now, since you said your favorite horror movie is The Thing, I have to ask the question that every fan of that movie gets asked. Who do you think is the Thing at the end?
So I like the idea that neither of them are the Thing. It's so bleak that they actually won, but they lost. And it almost doesn't matter if one of them is, if they both can't be, but if neither of them are, they've kind of won, but they're still going to freeze to death in the kind of the fires go out and everything. And so that makes it even more bleak.
I know. It's like I've always thought that Childs was the Thing, because they kind of centered him like very sneaky whenever all that stuff was going on with him and Blair and running out after Blair. I believe that Blair got him out in that storm. And so then it's actually a Thing stumbling back to camp instead of.
And we can't cope with Kurt Russell being the Thing, can we? So
no, Kurt Russell is never the Thing in any scenario. No, I refuse.
So there you go.
So, now, let's set the hook for this particular episode. So, in one sentence, why Ghostwatch? Why did you pick Ghostwatch to mainly talk about out of all the retro horror TV that's out there?
So, I think I'm just the right age. As a teenager when it went out, it was event TV. There was a buzz about it before it went out. And then we sat down as a family, we watched it, and it was mind-blowing. And then no one really showed it on the Beeb again. There's some issues we'll move on to. But it was very British and played very straight as well.
Yeah, wasn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the BBC just like they yanked it off and didn't show it again for like 10 something years on TV? Something like that?
I think they had thousands of complaints, and hopefully they had some kind of, phone calls in going, good job, great show. But they had thousands of complaints. It clogged up their phone lines. And there's some other sort of drama that came out of it, and some quite horrible stuff that comes out of it as well, which kind of led to that as well. So, but we'll get onto that.
Yeah, I think I know just the reason just why for that, but like you said, that we'll be talking about that a little bit later. But before we go full Ghostwatch, before we really dive into it, let's kind of focus on the big picture here. Horror, we've got just like this big buffet of things out there that we could consume. The two main things, I think, are horror movies and horror TV. But TV, especially retro horror TV, it hits differently than movies. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because of who you are. So you're a child when you've got this. It's often in your living room or your bedroom in the TV. And maybe or maybe not, the parent is there watching it with you. Whereas when we say we watch horror too young, it's either an older sibling or someone's, you can watch Night of the Living Dead with me because I'm your dad and we're going to watch it together. Whereas kind of the Goosebumps, the Tales from the Crypt, the thing that came to mind as I was thinking about this was Pee-wee with Large Marge in the truck, the kind of thing as a kid where you're like, whoa,
yeah,
but you're allowed to watch that. But then there's a scary bit in it that really kind of stays with you forever.
Oh, God, you brought up Pee-wee and like Large Marge. That's a movie, but not TV, but that freaked me out whenever I was a kid. Like that.
Yeah, and your parents don't know. You're just a kid watching TV. It's kids' TV. The fact that it's a bit more spooky, well, you're just doing your thing. I'm cooking dinner and you're watching telly, so everything's fine. But it's not fine.
Yeah, no, it's not fine. You're just being scarred for life. It's okay. Then we also got shows, like one that really sticks out in my mind that was really big during that time is Tales from the Crypt. And that really brought horror into homes with a lot of style, production, and flair. So what changes do you think when horror lives in your living room instead of a theater? Is it still the family aspect like you talked about earlier, like being able to sit down with your family and just like watch something on the TV, or is it something different?
I think particularly when you're younger, when you're a child going through this, it's familiar. That box in the corner of your living room, the TV, is part of the furniture, it's part of the family, isn't it? And ordinarily it's doing nice things, and then suddenly it's doing scary things. And this might be the first time you feel that real sense of fear and you've not gone elsewhere. You're not in a kind of, a roller coaster or a cinema or something. It's right there in your safe space. And then you're going up to bed because it's bedtime at the end of the show. So it hits differently for kids. Or maybe you've stayed up late and you've got a TV in your room and you're watching it in your bed and then turn it off and try and go to sleep without the nightmares. I think it's the fact that it comes into your territory rather than you going to the theatre. That's the big difference, I think.
That is really fascinating because, you go to the theater to watch something scary. You gotta leave that scary thing behind. You leave a scary thing behind. You come home to the safety of your house and you feel safe. You turn it on just like it's right. TV, it's right in your space. You're not safe.
Yeah, you leave the vampires and the werewolves in the cinema and you go home to normality, or you turn off the TV and they were just in the corner of your room before you did that. And that's a little bit more creepy certainly as a kid, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I think as adults, like we're a little bit more case hardened in that aspect. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to scare us in the horror genre, especially. Oh, in that era of retro horror TV, like especially, so we're talking maybe late 80s, 90s. So what are there some things that TV did better than movies, especially during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that you would have to get a self-contained story. That might be a 30-minute episode, or it might be a show that runs for an hour with adverts and so on. But it's much tighter storytelling. And so I know like Tales from the Crypt that you mentioned, and so we would get things like Erie Indiana as well,
Yes.
from the States as well. And that was fantastic. But there was also quite 80s British stuff as well. So we had still some of the kind of Hammer, they ran a TV show, Tales of the Unexpected, very sort of 70s. And the kind of thing that your parents would watch and you might stay up to watch with them. And some of them were really quite kind of unsettling, and then off you go, bedtime, you've just finished that. It's just that nice thing that we could be catching the American imports, we could be watching the stuff that's a few years older, we could be watching the kind of 80s contemporary horror, and some of it would be on kids' telly, and it would be aimed at children and not super scary, but just enough. A bit like, you know, Goosebumps stuff, isn't it? And so it'd be just in the middle of your sort of 5 p.m. kids' TV programming. Here's something a little bit more scary for you.
Yeah. Thinking about like all the horror TV I used to watch as a kid. Like over here, yeah, we had Goosebumps. We had Are You Afraid of the Dark? We had like the Erie, Indiana. So there's all that gateway kind of scary horror that's on TV. Like I said, that's kid friendly. And then like, you get past 5 o'clock, and then it's all just like the shh stuff that you're not supposed to be watching, but you do anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great in the UK. I know it's movies, not telly, but we wouldn't get much kind of horror movies in the UK. There'd be stuff that never got a release on VHS or whatever. And occasionally they would show this stuff late night on BBC, and you'd stay up extra late. They would often run it as a double bill, and there was a guy, I can't remember his name, I think it was Dr. Terror or something, who dressed up like a demon, and he would, a bit like Elvira, kind of introduce the movie, and then the second movie would kind of introduce, and then night. And so you would find these movies that you otherwise wouldn't be able to rent or see in the UK, and things like that as well was the kind of next step once you got through that gateway drug of kind of kids' TV stuff.
Yeah. I had guests from the UK before, so even though I've never seen Dr. Terror, I've heard Dr. Terror mentioned before. And the whole thing of horror movies, certain horror movies like that y'all are not able to view over there, it's because I'm sure it's because of the video nasties, kind of thing that y'all had going on over there. And I had people from the UK, whenever I mentioned, hey, like parents could take their kids to see horror movies over here, they're like, what? Like, what the heck? It's like, no, it's like, why do you take kids to go see rated R movies over here? Here, we can't like really see them until we're like 18 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it still is the case. You know, I could take my kids to a 12A where they go with the adult, or they can go by themselves, but they have to be 15 to get in a 15. They have to be 18 to get in an 18 movie, even if dad is there saying, no, it's fine, let them in. Tough. Obviously, your parent could rent a movie and there you go, and we watch it at home. So that's where I think we saw a lot of that sort of stuff that wasn't the kind of banned video nasty, but the Nightmare on Elm Street and that sort of, 80s, 90s, get it with dad from the video shop and sit down and watch it in the living room.
When I think about the difference between horror TV and horror movies, movies, they've still got the rating system that they play around with, but they seem to be able to get away with a little bit more than horror TV could at the time. What do you feel that TV had to work around, especially, that made it creative?
I think TV had to be more scary and unsettling because you couldn't get away with gore and shock and horror. So certainly in the UK, up to 9 p.m, we have the watershed and it's family friendly. And then 9 o'clock, all your kids should be in bed. And then that's where more adult stuff can come in with swearing and violence and stuff like that. But even then, you wouldn't get away with a TV show being particularly kind of gruesome and gory. So they would go down some of the sort of gothic horror or just kind of suburban horror, but unsettling rather than blood and guts. And it's blood and guts and jump scares don't actually last. It's this really spooky stuff that is staying in your head, and you're going to school to talk to your friends the next day. And that's the stuff that's harder to shake, isn't it? The kind of deeper scares, really.
And I bet that was kind of the vibe with Ghostwatch, especially the day after it aired. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it. You gave us a little 30-second overview of the vibe before it even started. Walk everybody through that in a little bit more detail. So I remember you mentioned that you knew like a week before that was coming, and it was advertised everywhere.
Yeah, so it was a Halloween special. So it was Halloween 1992. So like I say, I was 14, and we knew it was coming on BBC One, so the main channel. And I mean, all around the world, the BBC is known, very serious and kind of, respectable and that sort of thing. And they would do, drama and comedy stuff, but still had that kind of trustworthiness. And I think that's the thing that you knew that this was going to be trustworthy. And interestingly, actually, there was a long running show called Crime Watch, and that was real, where they would put up kind of unsolved crimes. The police were asking for the public's help. And here's a kind of, mugshot of the criminal we're trying to find. And it was the same sort of branding, Crime Watch and Ghostwatch. They used the same phone number to phone in. And so that kind of trustworthiness of the Beeb, where you're used to, I think there was like a Country Watch or Farm Watch as well, so that kind of consistent messaging. Clearly the writers have been very clever, and we're like, we'll pinch that and we'll make it feel like a spooky version of Crime Watch. Today on this live event, we're looking for the ghosts, not the criminal, but the ghosts. And so it had the same vibe. And I know we'll come on to the kind of whether in the moment you thought it was real or not, but there was enough there that is ordinarily real to make you go, well, maybe it could be. So yeah, I mean, it was brilliant. It was in the TV listing, so you knew what was coming. And if you were particularly astute, you would see that not the actors, the people involved were named as like presenter Michael Parkinson, distant host Sarah Green, and so on. So it wasn't just like himself and herself. And it was part of, I think it was called Screen One, which is like a drama series they would put on different dramas. Everyone I spoke to at school didn't see the first sort of 30 seconds where they said, now, as part of the Screen One drama series, a drama called Ghostwatch. We all missed that little health warning. And we all sat down kind of 1 minute in going, oh, great, it's on. Let's go. And particularly because it was before the days of, TV that you can pause and TV on demand. Right. If you missed the first minute, you were just diving in the living room and you're catching up and what have I missed? With everyone going, quick, it's coming on, get in. And so it wouldn't work now, but that sense of piggybacking on a real thing, making it feel real, and the trustworthiness of it's the BBC, so let's go with it. Really, really kind of powerful stuff.
Yeah, it's like the BBC would only air like things that are actually happening or that are actually believable. I could see why people, whenever it aired, thought that it was really happening. It's crazy. I think they knew what they were doing at that little 30-second thing they put at the beginning, and then they like never mentioned that again. It's like, you sneaky people.
Well, I went to, there was like an anniversary screening, and the writer and the director were there and doing a little talk, and they said that it was so kind of full on. They'd recorded it before, it didn't go out live. It was so full on that the Beeb were like, we want a little disclaimer running across the bottom of the screen all the time saying, this is a drama. They're like, no, that'll spoil it. And so that kind of intro was their kind of compromise of like, okay, we'll frame it as a drama, but then we'll get into it. I think they wanted to just go, now on BBC, Ghostwatch, and crack on like it was totally normal, which would have been even more fun. But most people back then would just dip in and dive out. And I remember my mom would be in and out the room doing whatever mom was doing back then. And that's just how TV worked back in the 80s. If you're in, you're watching it. If you're not, what have I missed?
Yeah, because it's not like I said, it's not like, okay, I'm going to pause this and then do what I'm going to do and then come back later. It's either you watched it right then or you had to wait till it aired again, which in this case with Ghostwatch took 10 years to air it again. Or hopefully you were one of the lucky few that had a VCR and VHS tapes that you could record stuff on.
Yeah, but even if you're recording it, well, I know we'll get onto it, but there's some really interesting bits where in the moment you would love to rewind 30 seconds and check something out, but you're in the middle of recording it. And so you're only going to do that when you watch it the next time over. And so, nowadays we can skip forward, skip backwards and everything else, can't we?
I know. We have it too easy nowadays.
Absolutely. I don't know how you would do something similar. It feels maybe a bit like the whole War of the Worlds and the kind of, people believe that was real on the radio. How would it work in a digital age? I have no idea whether it could. I think we're all too cynical and people would be immediately dismissing stuff and picking things apart. But you were just in your little family watching this thing. So
yeah, I think the last time it probably worked was with the Blair Witch Project. That's probably the last time that it worked, and I don't think it will ever. Nothing like that. When it comes to the believability of Ghostwatch, you mentioned that, well, it was on the main BBC station, BBC One. It was kind of connected in a way to Crime Watch. You had some very official, proper BBC presenters. So Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green. Were there any other aspects of it that made it believable to you?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, I think to a non-British audience, you don't quite get the impact of Michael Parkinson. And the best I can do for you would be like a Larry King or a David Letterman, and someone who you guys would be like, oh wow, well it's him, so it's totally legit. It's not an actor. And his job was to present and host live chat shows and live telly. So it's trying to find a figure like that, which gives you a little bit of relatability of the context that was happening. But it was just the little details, really, of, yeah, it was the cast. It was the kind of jumping from the studio to the outside broadcast. All that stuff was still quite kind of exciting and new when you would just watch kind of TV dramas, and, you know, having live telly was still a bit different. In the UK, we would have that sort of like charity appeals where live comedy might be running through the night and so on. And so it was a bit like that kind of vibe, whereas everything else was studio recorded. And then the fact that you were invited to phone in if you saw anything weird. And like I say, you know, the kids' TV show in the morning and Crime Watch was the BBC number 081 811 8181. Still remember it. And it was the same number on Ghostwatch. So again, it was little details like, oh, it must be real because that's the BBC number. It's not just a made up number.
That's wild. Yeah, because I remember when I watched it, I saw a number at the bottom and I was like, wow, I wonder if it's just like some fake number that they just made up like for all that. But no, it was real. Oh my God.
Yeah, and apparently if you called the number on the night, they didn't expect it to be as popular as it was. I think they had like 2 people staffing the lines.
Oh, geez.
And so very quickly you were supposed to get a recorded message saying something like, this is a Ghostwatch drama, please, you're fine, don't worry. And then that crashed and didn't work, so everyone was like, the lines are jammed and I've just seen a ghost and I'm trying to get through to the TV, you know. So in many ways a nice coincidence that probably made it even better for the experience if you did pick up your phone and call.
Were there any other parts of it or any other moments where you were like, wait, this feels just too real for its own good?
I think it's the pacing works really well. It's real. It's a normal suburban house. It's like a 80s, 90s house that you might be growing up in, the same sort of thing. It's not some gothic castle with Christopher Lee kind of, you know. So it felt very real. You were in someone's living room on that broadcast, and it felt like going to your friend's house, your auntie's house, and seeing their living room. So all of that really helped. And the pacing, that actually not much is happening, and then there's a bit of a fake out of, is it real, is the girl putting it on? And yeah, by the end you watch it, you go, well, this can't be real. By the very final sort of few minutes, you're like, this has gone too crazy. But it's the journey up for the first sort of 60-70 minutes where you're like, did Sarah Green just die on telly? What's going on?
When I think about live TVs, like especially, it puts me in a different headspace than kind of like a movie does. So what do you think that live TV does to your brain, especially, that just a movie can't?
You can always tell yourself this isn't real, can't you?
Yeah.
We've seen it on posters, to keep telling yourself it's just a movie, it's just a movie, it's just a movie, you know. So yeah, you can always look sideways, you can close your eyes, you can hide behind the couch, and you can still do that in your own living room. But when it's at least presented as live TV, you kind of feel like, is this real? And so there's enough doubt in yourself where you're like, maybe this could be real. Maybe the Ghostwatch equivalent of Crime Watch has gone really wrong, and we're watching it, and soon the BBC is going to jump in and cut the feed and be like, we're really sorry, Michael Parkinson just died and got possessed. You want it to be real as well. Let's be really honest with ourselves. So you kind of, the little voice in the back of your head, you're like, shut up, this is really good. Come on, let's pretend it's real. And so you dismiss that bit of kind of critical thinking and you go with the flow of the live event.
Man, I don't know like how I would feel if I found out later. Like if I had watched Ghostwatch and then I was talking about with my friends later on the next day, like, oh man, did you see this like really cool, like real thing Ghostwatch? Like, it's not real. I found out it wasn't. Like, God dang it. I feel duped.
Well, we would know instantly online now, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we would.
And so even if it was trying to trick you, someone would be able to prove it was just a kind of fake production. And when I was talking to another friend about this, I remember a similar sort of time we had, you have much more exciting magicians in the States. We had a guy called Paul Daniels who was very British, and he did this kind of Halloween Christmas special or something. I can't remember when, but his last trick was he was trying to escape from this box that was full of spikes, and it squashed him and it went wrong. And then the credits just rolled, and we're like, have I just watched Paul Daniels die on the telly? And there was no sort of like, don't worry, guys, it's not real. It was just a trick. It just went to the next show. And now you would be Googling, like, is Paul Daniels still alive? Yeah, he is. Yeah. But we went back to school the next day going, is Paul Daniels dead? Did you watch that magic show where he died last night? And it was like the next time you saw him on telly, you're like, oh, he can't be dead because he's on TV now. But there was just a different vibe of they didn't look after you in quite the same way, and you couldn't go and find out yourself. So
it's like, did I just watch a snuff show or something?
yeah, by accident.
Jesus.
Anyway, it's bedtime. Off you go, kiddies. You know, sweet dreams.
Yeah, I remember seeing a clip of what you talked about on YouTube. And I was just like, what was going on over there? Just like in the UK, just like not giving warnings about what's real and what's not.
Yeah, and you feel like now they would be like, this was just a drama, and Paul Daniel, or he would come out and go, I got you, you know, but he was just like, no, there's the credits, fade to black, get the next TV show on, maybe I'm dead. Yep. Now I got you.
I'm sure he's responsible for scarring many people for life with that.
Yeah. We all worked out just fine though, didn't we? So, you know, but there we go.
Yeah. Now let's kind of now dissect Ghostwatch and get a little bit, so we're going to be surgeons and get a little bit surgical with this here. So how exactly does Ghostwatch build dread instead of being like, scary, jumping out at you?
I think, like I say, the pacing, it gets you to relax. It gets you to think you're just watching, and they're almost taking the mick out of each other, going, one of them puts a mask on and boo, I've got you. And they're kind of playing with the idea that this isn't real. You know, we're trying to make each other jump. Parky as the host is kind of questioning everything, a bit like, why have I been booked for this gig? I don't believe this you know, clairvoyant woman or whatever's going on in the studio. It's all a bit of nonsense. And so it really kind of eases away that sense of questioning that you might have got, and then they can ramp it up and make just little things happen, but then back to normality, and then some more stuff happens and back to normality. I think there are some fake outs in there that are fantastic. And like I said, you can't pause telly now, but I remember really clearly that I was watching the bit and it pans across and there's Mr. Pipes in the background, and then it pans back and he's not there. And like I say, that was the moment that my mom had, I don't know, just finished cooking dinner or whatever, came in and saw him. And before we said anything, there was a bloke at the back there. And then it pans back and he's not there. And we go, what are you on about, Mum? There's no one there. And then the next scene is someone phones in, going, I've just seen a bloke at the back. And they play the footage and he's not there. And we're like, look, Mum, they've rewound the tape and he's not there. And she's like, I swear I saw a bloke by the curtain. And so that kind of fake out and taking you places and bringing you back when you're not in control of the pace, but they are, I just think that's brilliant. And it's such a good ride. I mean, we know what happens now, and if you've got it on DVD, whatever, but you know, back then in 92, you were like, this is really exciting, and it might be real or might not, but I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I think in that way it kind of rewards attention, because especially with the Mr. Pipes thing, I know especially nowadays, people that can pause and be like, oh, there's Mr. Pipes, I'm seeing like another sighting of Mr. Pipes, like there he is. I think, like, if I'm remembering correctly, there's 21 total like sightings of Mr. Pipes in there. I'm not quite sure of the number, but I think especially back then, that something like that would reward your attention. Like if you were like very on the edge of your seat and you were just like looking at all the details to see everything that was going on, being able to catch Mr. Pipes maybe in the act.
Yeah, and I wonder, even subconsciously, like if we saw him in the back, but we didn't register it and kind of go, oh, I've just seen something creepy. You have seen something creepy, but you've not fully understood it. And then it maybe moves, you know, that sort of subliminal kind of thing. Because he's just kind of in the crowd or up on the rafters or for half a second. And everyone will have freeze framed it and found it all online. Like I say, there's many sightings, isn't there? But in the moment, you missed most of them.
Yeah.
But it probably did go in enough to go, what was that? And that what was that moment is enough to creep you out a little bit more and draw you in even further.
I think that's also what what is part of makes something like that so scary. It's what you think you're about to see rather than what you see. So that building up, like you said, that pacing and that building up of that dread is what makes something like that pretty creepy.
It's what happens in your head, isn't it? It's what we
Yeah.
always say.
Yeah.
Often what you see on a screen is nothing as scary as what you imagine in your mind. They do a really great job of playing on that, I think. And they show you some stuff, but it's what you did or
Right.
didn't see as well that also creeped you out.
So now everybody has got their Ghostwatch, like during that time on October 31st, 1992. So they've watched Ghostwatch. It ends. So what happened next? So for just you in particular, and just for the whole like culture of the UK in general. So what was the reaction of everybody after this aired?
My 14-year-old reaction was, that was really cool. But it was a weekend. And so the next, Monday when you went into school, you would be like, did you see it? It was great, wasn't it? And even kids who aren't kind of into that sort of thing had seen it. I think that's something that we've kind of lost, that event telly where the whole class would have watched the same thing the night before. And we had 4 channels growing up before we had kind of cable and all this sort of stuff. So if something was on and it was aimed at you, you would watch it. So there was the moment with the family of kind of going, what the hell have we just watched? That was really good. And then unpacking it with your friends and go, oh, it's great. When did you think it was real? When did you cut on that maybe it wasn't? Did you see the guy by the curtain? So there was a lot of that. I think maybe if you were a little bit older, I know there were loads of complaints. So certain kinds of people, or maybe older people, would have been the ones who were like, I don't appreciate that. Thank you very much. I expect more from the BBC. And maybe parents whose kids couldn't sleep for days and days, probably less happy than the 14-year-old was. But I think they did get a number of calls of like, good job, guys, as well as thousands of, not so much. Thank you very much.
Was there also a vibe of maybe people feeling like, oh, I've been tricked and I'm pissed, or, oh, I've been tricked, but it was still a good time. Like I still enjoy myself.
I think it was that. It was, you got me. And that was great. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Which is a nice spirit to take it in, because if they've tricked you, it was to scare you and to make you enjoy that emotion. Do you know what I mean? I don't think we go in like all hardened and like, oh, they got me, being taken for that ride, and then be like, they got me. I think that was generally the consensus amongst friends and things like that.
I have to ask, was there any moment during Ghostwatch where you were like, oh, wait a minute, this seems like a little bit too unbelievable to be real? Or were you just like, whoa, this is 100% real, just like all throughout?
I think there's a couple of bits. I think the doctor who's like, talking Parky through and stuff, I think she's maybe not the best actress in the world and is a little bit wooden, but you've chosen to overlook that. And so you're like, I'll turn a blind eye to that because I want it to be real. Obviously, it really ramps up towards the end. But what's happening in the house, you're kind of like, maybe this kind of external feed, the live feed with Sarah in the house, maybe that is real. It's more the sort of Parky in the studio and the cameras flowing around and we're having this mass national seance and you're going to suffer too, because you've watched this show. At that point, you're a bit like, you may be overreaching here, guys. I don't know who would have made it right to the end and gone, oh my God, that was all real and I've just taken part in a seance. I think largely we were like, that really spooked me out. Good job. But great job. It was, even 90% in, I figured it out. I think that would be most people.
I have to wonder, like, what would be the split between horror fans and non-horror fans in terms of the factor of believability. Because, like, coming in as a horror fan, you would probably be a little bit more case hardened and be like, is this like real? Like, I don't know. I don't know. There may be some parts that aren't. Whereas a non-horror fan, you'd be like, oh my God, this is 100% real. That's kind of like something that I wonder about.
I think that the context of it is quite powerful. And so, many people will look back to Nightmare on Elm Street as a movie because it was suburban houses, normal teenagers. If you were that age, that looked like the street you grew up on. And that was the same thing with this, I think, of like I say, it wasn't all Hammer horror and gothic, or it wasn't all otherworldly or monsters. Many people, regardless of your faith, will have that sense of sort of spiritual stuff and ghostly things, and I believe this or I believe that. And so everyone watching it could find their own little place in that, of like, do I believe in ghosts? Do I not? Well, what have I just seen? And if I totally believe in ghosts, even if I hate horror, I'm along for the ride because of that. If I love horror, I'm along for the ride because of that. If I live in a suburban home with 2 daughters, I'm along for the ride because it feels like me as a young mum, whatever. So I think that normality was really powerful as well.
Yeah, I think that's also part of why, probably part of why that people found it so scary, was because of the normal, like just the very normalization of it. But like you said, if it was set in just like this big gothic Hammer horror type house, you'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah, this is totally fake.
Yeah, and you mentioned Blair Witch, didn't you?
Yeah.
The people who don't like that, I mean, I love Blair Witch, but people who don't like it, like, yeah, it was fake, it's whatever. But I went into it going, what if I just went hiking with some mates and this happened, And so then you've got that empathy for the characters, and that's just like you and your mates, and you're just watching something equivalent. So I think when things are normal, you can step in and go along for the ride on the back of that character and be a bit like, yeah, I'm picking that guy because he's a bit like me. Let's hope he survives. And that's partly what we try and do with our podcast as well, of like, who are we going to back to make it to the finish line? But I love that normality of stuff. I do like kind of your really out there, otherworldly horror, but I think this sort of stuff just makes it much more relatable.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I'm glad that you picked Ghostwatch to talk about, because it's very just interesting experience, just even for me, like seeing it way past like when it aired. But now part of Hall Pass means that, hey, you get to shout out your other favorite retro horror TV just beyond Ghostwatch. Because if you're on the retro horror TV episode, I'm assuming that you like retro horror TV. So give me your favorites. Give me your favorite. You could do up to 4 retro horror TV shows if you've got 4 favorites, but give me your absolute favorite retro horror TV shows.
Okay, I will throw out an episode of Erie, Indiana. I think it was called something like The Lost Hour. And basically they changed the time zone, whatever. We do that in the UK. We get to a certain point, we put the clocks forward or back. And the character's like, this is so stupid. Why do we all change the clock back? I'm not going to do it. And he goes to bed and he wakes up and everyone's vanished. The whole town is deserted and he's basically stuck out of time. And then there is creepy kind of garbage men collecting anything that didn't move into the new time zone. And I just really like that kind of, you're now stuck away from everyone else. So that was a really good one. I love Tales from the Crypt. And particularly the Christmas episode. I love the
house.
All through the house. Particularly, I love the movie version with Joan Collins as well. But the TV shows, they've done it, and I think that works brilliantly. The little girl, I've let him in, mummy. I believe in Santa, and here he is, ready to get you. So that's the kind of thing. Those little contained stories are great. And then I've got to say, I mean, it's a full length movie, but it went out on TV. So Threads, growing up, the nuclear war movie, which is about as real and horrific as we can get. And that was set where I live in Sheffield. And they were the shops that I used to go in with my mum that got nuked and blew up. And that was the city centre that I walked through that got nuked. And so, and I think I would have been, I don't know, 6 or 7.
Oh my gosh.
I can't remember because it's some time ago. I'm pretty sure as a kind of, public health kind of thing, they showed it us in school. Because I remember watching it and just being like, what the hell have I just watched? Not bad enough that we got nuked, but then that kind of, this is what happens 10, 20, 50 years after the nukes. And we're like, okay, thanks for showing us that, sir. What's the next lesson? And my memories may be blurred with that one as well. I mean, it's fantastic in how bleak and how powerful it is. It's not fantastic to watch. I do remember at the same sort of time, there were lots of protests, kind of anti-war, anti-nuke stuff. And I don't know if it's an overlap between the filming or what, but I remember going into the city centre, into the high street shops and stuff. And there were loads of that sort of like where they kind of chalk outline bodies, whether that was for continuity in the movie or some sort of protest. But I remember being like 6 and seeing all these silhouette bodies on the kind of high street and going, Mum, what's this? So this was the childhood we had in the 80s in the UK. That's why we're all so well adjusted. But
yeah, childhood in the 80s, just like over here in the US, was like, oh, you can watch this horror movie or this thing, a horror thing on TV at 6 or 7, you'll be fine. Like you'll develop just fine. And yeah, I think we're okay. Albeit a little weird, but hey, weird's fine.
You've seen it all. I probably need to throw one more thing in as well, that back in the UK, because for some reason I think they assumed that children would just constantly die by doing stupid stuff and having accidents. So they used to show us these like public service short movies in school and on TV that were like, don't go and play on the train tracks, don't hit the electric pylon with a stick, don't run out into traffic. And you would just see these children getting killed. Genuinely, you can find a lot of these on YouTube. Or we were terrified of falling in like quicksand or a bog, and then just that's it. You just vanished and died. This stuff was just like, right, kids, you need to learn about road safety. Here's a kid who ran in the road and they just got killed. Don't run in the road, kids. You're like, okay, can we do it a little bit calmer now? So that was a real big thing back in a little bit before as well, the sort of 60s, 70s, 80s. They didn't mess about.
No, it sounds like they didn't. It's like, I'm surprised that not more kids like in the UK, like didn't grow up like traumatized for like all this stuff. My God.
Hey, we're Gen X. We could handle anything. We were fine.
Oh my God. Whew. Okay, so trauma aside, the impact of horror TV and horror fandom especially. I feel that at times, like different like subsets of horror, whether it's horror books, games, movies, TV, they'll shape like the horror fandom differently. So in your opinion, how do you think that horror TV shapes horror fandom differently than like say a horror movie does?
It's probably its accessibility, I think, particularly at that younger age. I had friends who they're not allowed to watch that movie because it's a 15 certificate and you're only 13. Whereas because it's on TV, or because, hey, let me lend you this book, or let me show you this comic or something, or let's play this video game. They were kids' things. Books and telly and video games were kiddies' toys almost. And movies were a more grown-up thing where you may be invited into that space. So that kind of accessibility of it gave you that kind of common space as young people, where even that stricter parent, you could chat to that kid and say, hey, you've still read this though, haven't you? Because your mum thinks that's a kid's comic or whatever. Even though you're not allowed to watch The Shining, and we'll talk about that in a few years when you're a bit older and stuff. So I think there's that really powerful thing of, I think that's the thing with horror, we all see things differently. And I mean, whether you're a man or a woman watching it and whether you're of a certain age or whatever, we're even the same thing. If we're all battle hardened, we'll see things differently because of our own experience. But it's that ability to kind of watch and discuss and unpack. And we know it is not real. It might feel real. It's not a werewolf. It's just a serial killer or whatever. But we know it's not real and we know we're safe. So we can go into those dark places, feel what we feel, and then we're safe. We come back, we chat about it, we laugh about it. I think that's the really powerful thing about horror. We go to the cinema and people jump and scream, and then you giggle because your mate jumped and you didn't. And that's the lovely thing about it. It's like laughter, but it's a little bit darker.
Yeah. It gives it a kind of communal experience, because I feel horror is the best whenever it's shared in a community, whether the community is just your family at home and you're watching something on TV, or you're going to the theater and experiencing that scare with about 100 or so other people.
Yeah, and you want to share it, don't you? So if you see something that's particularly scary and your mate hasn't, you're like, check this out, and I'm going to watch you. I'm not going to watch the thing because I'm waiting for you to get it. Oh, they got you too. They got me with the same thing. So really, really good fun.
And so when it comes for you personally, just right after you watch Ghostwatch. Did Ghostwatch in particular change what you were willing to watch afterwards, or change what you believed horror could do?
I think what it showed me is that it could be more normal. It could be on the telly. It didn't have to be a horror movie from the video shop. And I would watch those with my dad, that kind of anchor to reality. It can't hurt me what's on the TV because my dad sat next to me on the couch. Whereas this just made it a bit more normal, that, you know, you could then think back to something that's a little bit darker, a little bit more grown up. But because I've kind of made it through Ghostwatch, I know how things might work this time. Or I'll let them take me on the same journey and I'll feel a little bit more of that kind of, oh, they got me, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, it wasn't just a case of you were watching the kind of Goosebumps, if we're going to make that out as a kind of entry point. It's nice to have different places where you go that aren't a million miles an hour, you know, The Exorcist. There's a kind of a journey in between.
Now, let's head into the present tense. Nowadays, most of the stuff that we watch on TV is going to be on streaming. So any one of the multitudes of streaming services that are out there that has whatever you want to watch, whether it's horror or horror movies, horror TV, just whatever genre, just pretty much is just out there. It's on streaming. So, do you feel that there's any modern horror TV, so to speak, that carries the same spirit as Ghostwatch, that evokes like the same kind of feeling of, oh my God, this feels like real, this could happen just like anywhere, because like it's just in a neighborhood or just in my town? Just so any kind of modern TV, horror TV, do you feel evokes that same spirit, if any?
I would probably have to say a show called Inside Number 9, which is a BBC thing, which is a kind of comedy horror, but it's not played for laughs. It is funny, but it isn't played for laughs. And they actually did, they love horror, the two guys who write it. And they did The League of Gentlemen, which is a kind of very British comedy thing as well.
Oh.
Now, they did a live broadcast for Halloween where they kind of paid homage to Ghostwatch. And it went out live. And the only bit where we get a little bit more meta and we say that kind of thing, oh, it would never work again. It cuts to those two guys backstage when the feed has gone wrong and they're in the green room waiting for the tech crew to put them back on. And we're watching the security camera of them kind of going, oh, bloody hell, it's not worked. You know, we're not going to be able to get out of telly, and getting really frustrated. And they look up and they see themselves on the TV in the green room. And he goes, is that live? Is that BBC? Yeah, that's BBC. Well, why are we on? And he goes, hang on. And he tweeted. And so Reese tweeted out, am I on BBC right now? And that went out live on Twitter. So if you've got your phone, and, you know, I don't like double screening, but, you know, if you've got your phone in that moment, you'd see Reese on telly tweeting, and loads of people, and some of his friends who were like other kind of actors were going, yeah, show's not gone so well, but, you know, trying to stick with it. And that was the thing, that there was just a little kind of more modern hook of trying to use tech to get you in. But yeah, that's the kind of show where they do a 30-minute kind of contained story, some very kind of out there, some very normal. And this was a kind of love letter to Ghostwatch that they did as well for a Halloween special.
Yeah. Now, on the opposite end, do you feel that there's any modern horror TV that tried to evoke that feeling but just absolutely missed the mark?
I don't know about that. I mean, I think like as a movie, Late Night with the Devil kind of went that way.
Yeah.
And I know that the guys who made Blair Witch, the guys who made Paranormal Activity, being over the pond, but they were aware of it, and they were like, yeah, I've heard of that, I've seen it as well. So it's had that influence as well in quite different ways. I think, as much as I said I like the self-contained episodes and short stories, I think where TV goes nowadays, because there seems to be a lot more production, a lot more money in it, you can take that story and go places that you wouldn't in a 90-minute movie. So you get a 6-hour miniseries, or you get, you know, The Walking Dead for, who knows, 12 series or whatever they did, where you really dive into these characters and you develop their stories. And yes, they are stories, and, you know, Haunted House and Bly Manor and all that sort of stuff. You know, it's a story, you know, it's a drama, but they're able to kind of put it in a TV format with that kind of depth to go places, rather than we must squeeze it into 92 minutes. Otherwise, we're not going to get it into the cinemas and stuff. So TV, I just think, has shifted and is much slicker in general, isn't it?
Yeah. But you could definitely see the influences from all the older retro stuff that we grew up watching. So even though TV is slicker and has more production value now, you can still see glimpses of those influences. Definitely the older stuff still matters, even if people like nowadays might look at it and be like,
yeah, I think they get away with a lot more. Some of the kind of gore in The Walking Dead is on a par with a movie, isn't it? And
yeah,
I don't think we would have got that level of kind of blood and guts back in the day. They would need to be more clever and more dramatic. So there's a shift there in what the TV channels are allowed to get away with and what their sponsors will let them put out and all the rest of it.
Yeah, back then that kind of stuff would only be allowed like on HBO. Yeah, they wouldn't be allowed on just like the regular late night TV. So,
yeah,
improvement maybe, or maybe not, just depending on what side of the line that you fall on.
Well, I know we're going on a tangent, but it's put kind of horror in a different place, hasn't it? When Oscar nominations for movies and being taken more seriously. And I think the fact that horror TV has put it in people's streaming living rooms, and it's a bit slicker and it's a bit more, it's not cheap, it's not rubbish, it's not tacky, it's not what they thought it might be, it's not just shock tactics, it's this is a really interesting story that's scary as I go through it. And so it's kind of represented horror to the masses in a slightly different way, I suppose.
Yeah, so enough horror for everybody, whether you choose to watch it on the TV or you choose to watch it in the theaters. Especially 2025 was a banger year for horror, and 2026 it looks to be the same way. So we're going to be getting all the horror everywhere. So it's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now we're going to, before we wrap things up, I'm going to be giving you some what I like to call office hour questions. So they're very quick, just kind of answer questions. So the first answer that pops into your head. So are you ready?
Let's go.
All right. So first question, what retro horror TV show should everyone watch at least once?
Ghostwatch, for sure.
Ghostwatch. Easy answer. Ghostwatch. So next question, your favorite single creepy episode of anything ever? I know you mentioned that Tales from the Crypt episode earlier. Is that the same answer for this one?
I am going to give you something else. And I cannot remember the show, but it had such an impact on me. And it was a British thing. And all I remember was a family bought an old disused primary school to turn into a home. And things got very spooky. I can't remember much about it. And then the last scene was the parents went in to save one of the kids and they never came out. And the other kid who was outside safe was just staring at this door, waiting for the family to come out. And then credits. And I was like, well, that's just ruined me. And I can't remember what the show is. I'd love to watch it again. So that's probably the first one that comes to mind.
That kid's like, well, I guess I'm an orphan now.
Yeah, pretty much. Off you go to the credits, orphan. See you later. So like another one that just kind of burned in your mind where you're like, what have I just watched?
Okay. Now, next question. What is one horror TV character that scared you more than any horror movie monster?
Oh, gosh. In the UK, we had one aimed at kids, to be fair, the Demon Headmaster. And so that would be when you were very much primary school age, kind of under 10. But that very strict, very British, kind of scary. And it turned out that he was demonic as well. He wasn't just that kind of grumpy, strict teacher. And so, yeah, he comes to mind.
And last of the office hours questions, one hot take about horror TV that you'll defend, that you'll absolutely die on that hill defending.
Just that it can bring it into your living room. You can be lying in bed watching this TV as you're half drifting off and you're not fully with it, and then it's there. And then even though you click the remote, it's still that space that you are continuing to exist in. So that's what makes it really powerful, I think.
All right. And then one last closing recommendation. If someone's listening or watching this episode and they're like, oh, cool. Yeah. Ghostwatch sounds pretty freaking interesting. I think I'm going to watch this. What else would you pair with it to make a perfect, just kind of retro horror TV night?
Yeah. If you wanted to go with a movie, then chuck Late Night with the Devil, but we'll stick with TV. So yeah, I would recommend Inside Number 9. The first episode is great. The Halloween special is great. And they do a Christmas special, which actually is a bit of a meta thing into horror TV. So they kind of build it around an old 70s TV show like Tales from the Unexpected from before I was a kid. So it's what's it called? The Devil at Christmas, I think it's called. It's about Krampus, the
Ooh,
German kind of
yeah.
anti-Santa. So that's a really good one. 30 minutes, that would pair up really nice with Ghostwatch.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, sadly, as they say, almost good things must come. Sadly, as they say, I'm getting tongue-tied here. All good things must come to an end. And this episode has now come to an end. So, Leighton, once again, thank you for coming on and bringing just the absolutely perfect retro horror TV thing to talk about for this episode, Ghostwatch. I really appreciate having you on.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's been an absolute blast. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Now, before I let you go for realsies, tell people where they can find you and find your podcast and find you on social media.
Yeah, sure. So we're not big on socials because we're old men, but we're on Instagram. So Instagram is the only channel we mess about with. Surviving Horror Podcast. We post on Insta, and we're a podcast that you get on any of your podcast platforms. So we put out an episode on the 1st of each month where we look at a movie. We've got Sinners is coming up as our next one, and then we'll go back to They Live. So we kind of go modern-ish, old school, modern-ish, old school. And then through the month, to keep the fans happy, we drop in either a little look at a short horror, kind of 5-minute chat about a 5-minute horror short, and then a bit of a spooky story as well. Our last episode, actually, we could barely make through because we were making each other laugh so much. So me and Danny, who host it, we are best friends and have known each other since school. So hopefully that kind of, well, I've said as well, it's not just a horror podcast. It's a podcast about friendship through the lens of horror as well. So we made it. There was a bit of editing. There was a lot of giggling, but we put out a slightly different episode this month.
Oh, by the time this episode comes out, because I'm putting it out just right on the end of the month, then the next day, you'll be able to head over to the Surviving Horror Podcast to check out their episode. So I will have the links to where they can find your Instagram and your podcast and everything in the description below. Okay.
Amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for being here. And thank you to everybody for listening or watching or however you choose to consume this podcast. Class is dismissed for now, but I will see you all next time.